Welcome to the class of History, Politics and Power. In the last class, we talked about Buhari's war on corruption. This is a continuation of that subject, but this time we are focusing on the kidnap of Umaru Dikko. Why was he kidnapped? Who were those involved? Why did it lead to a diplomatic fight between Nigeria and Britain? Muhammadu Buhari was serious. He made that clear. He was determined as military head of state to show that those who stole will not go unpunished. Umaru Dikko was one of those he spotted. He promised to pursue Umaru Dikko to the end. He was not willing to stand down. So, Buhari had a plan. The attempt to kidnap Umaru Dikko in London caused a major dispute between Nigeria and Britain. Although the Nigerian government had denied it was involved, however, the government was accused of hiring Israeli intelligence officers to kidnap Umaru Dikko, place him in a crate, and fly him to Nigeria without Britain's knowledge. It was suspected that Mossad, Israel's highly efficient intelligence agency, was contacted for the job. British sources claimed that Mossad carried out the kidnapping in London with help from Nigeria's National Security Organization, NSO. But today, we talk about the DSS. On a day in July 1984, the agents located Dikko's hideout at number 25 Proteus Terrace. They waited for him to come out. When Dikko walked past their boss, they grabbed him, dragged him inside. They drugged him, and they loaded him into a diplomatic crate to be flown to Nigeria. The day before Umaru Dikko was kidnapped, an empty Nigeria Airways Boeing 707 had arrived in London to fly the crated Dikko back for trial. However, while the kidnapping was taking place, Dikko's secretary saw the action. So, the police was alerted. Knowing Dikko was a fugitive in London, British authorities immediately suspected Nigeria's involvement and raised security alert at the airport. At the airport, British officials insisted on inspecting the diplomatic crate. This led to a tense standoff at the airport between Nigeria and British officials. Britain refused to load the crate onto the Nigerian Airways flight without inspection. Inside, Dikko was found unconscious and taken to the hospital. This showed how far the Buhari government was willing to go to deal with politicians it saw as corrupt politicians of the Second Republic. Umaru Dikko was the Minister of Transport in the Shehu Shagari government, the same government that Muhammadu Buhari overthrew. Let's read from a book that tells the story. The book is entitled All Eyes on Me by H.A. Hanania. All Eyes on Me. What is the book about? In All Eyes on Me, Haidu Hanania, a retired Major General, renders account of what transpired in the failed attempt to abduct the late Alhaji Umaru Dikko from London in 1984, when he, Hanania, was the Nigerian High Commissioner in the United Kingdom. Hanania also confirms that the Guardian story, which led to the imprisonment of Ndukai Rabo and Tunde Thompson by the Buhari Diagbo regime, was indeed accurate, and that the journalists were punished not for any professional infraction, but rather for the embarrassment the information leakage caused the federal military government at the time. So it's a book that tells the story of the Umaru Dikko affairs. He was the High Commissioner to Britain at the time. He was a military officer. So he tells the story from a point of view of a man who knew everything. But did he know that Umaru Dikko was going to be kidnapped? Let's read from chapter 14 of his book. Chapter 14 is entitled The Abduction of Umaru Dikko. Hanania says Nigeria and Britain have never broken diplomatic relations, although the two nations were close to doing so in 1976 after the assassination of the head of state, General Murtala Muhammad, in an aborted military coup. At that time, the federal government accused Britain of aiding the coup planners by allowing them to use the British High Commission in Lagos to allegedly make contact with the ousted General Yakubu Gowon in London. As a result, General Yakubu Gowon was accused of plotting with the rebels. The Nigerian government requested that the British government send Gowon back to Nigeria to face a military trial and was rebuffed. It took a year before the diplomatic relations between both countries returned to normal in 1977. However, in 1979, the relationship soured again over the issue of Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. It was about Zimbabwe's independence. Hanania says that the federal government had seen the unwillingness of the newly elected Conservative Prime Minister of Britain, Margaret Thatcher, to make a gesture of confidence over the illegal regime in Rhodesia. So, on the eve of the Lusaka Commonwealth Prime Ministers Conference, the then head of state of Nigeria, General Olusegun Obasanjo, authorized the seizure of British petroleum assets in Nigeria. Though Britain reacted with horror at that move, there was still no major damage to the diplomatic relationship, and the Lancaster House Conference that followed eventually led to the birth of an independent Zimbabwe. Still reading from the book All Eyes on Me, written by Major General Haidu Hanania, a retired Major General. He says, later years, the case of a former Nigerian public official on exile in London caused tension between the two countries, and things degenerated very quickly. In 1984, an attempt to abduct Alhaji Umaru Dikko, who was on exile in Britain, caused a huge international uproar. As the Nigerian High Commissioner in London, I was at the center of the storm. Dikko was the transport minister under the administration of his brother-in-law and Second Republic President, Alhaji Shehu Shagari. Born in Wamba, a village close to Zaria in Kaduna State, Dikko had previously served as commissioner in North Central State, Kaduna, under the Gowon regime. In 1979, Dikko vied for a seat at the Senate and lost, after which he was appointed as a minister. So the author has given us the background of Umaru Dikko. The author has taken us through Nigeria-Britain relationship, the SAR period. You know, the 1976-1977 quarrel between both countries is quite representative of Nigeria's stance at that moment. Nigeria helped fight for the independence of Zimbabwe. Nigeria was in Angola supporting the struggle against the socialists. Nigeria also supported the struggle in Mozambique, supported the struggle in Namibia and South Africa. In fact, Nigeria was a frontline state in those struggles, and that pitched Nigeria against Britain. But the Umaru Dikko saga was an affair that escalated some of the sour moments. Let's continue the reading. On page 129 of the book, Haidu Hananiah writes, as it had happened, no politician symbolized the graft and avarice under Shagari's government more than Dikko, who reserved importation licenses for members of the ruling National Party of Nigeria, NPN, and he acted as though he was above the law. Hananiah says that Dikko spoke with arrogance when he was minister, even on issues that were beyond his purview. For instance, he contributed to a national discourse on the poverty rate in the country by saying that things were not so bad, since all Nigerians were at that time not eating out of the dustbins. There were, however, stories that Buhari's problem with Dikko began a few months before the general elections in 1983. As GOC in Jos at the time, Buhari had led Nigerian troops to prevent infiltration by armed rebels from Chad. After the insurgents withdrew back into the Chadian territory, Buhari's command was meant to retreat, but Buhari went beyond his brief, questioning the wisdom of merely repressing the rebels when they could return to infiltrate Nigeria. Apparently slighted by Buhari's action, Shagari had to involve his superior officers like General Jallo and Wushishi to order him to pull back. From that moment, Dikko reportedly placed Buhari under surveillance. Even though he was the transport minister, Dikko was a very powerful man in the Shagari administration, and there were reports that he had recommended that Buhari be retired from the army. So it came as a surprise when, following the toppling of the Second Republic, Dikko had to flee. He knew he was a marked man. He exiled himself in London, where I had assumed office as the Nigerian High Commissioner. On the 5th of July 1984, a formal luncheon was organized in my honor by Mr. Malcolm Rifkind, MP, Minister of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs at number 1 Carlton Gardens. We were at the luncheon when the story of the aborted abduction of Dikko broke, although I later learned that Lieutenant General Yakubu Danjuma, then a retired officer, and Aliyu Mohammed Gusau, an intelligence officer still in service, and a few others were involved in the planning. I was not put in the picture, but I had some inkling about what was going on from our ambassador in Paris, Yahya. A few days before the incident, Yahya had told me that a plan was afoot to abduct Dikko from London, but it had been decided that I was not to be informed. So when it eventually happened, I called Yahya asking him what I should do. He told me, do nothing. Do nothing. Did he do anything? Okay. Let's read one more page. One more page. Why that made sense in the circumstance. I also knew that a prompt denial by the Nigerian government was necessary. So that was exactly what I did. But merely 24 hours after the incident, I was summoned to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Why that made sense in the circumstance. I also knew that a prompt denial by the Nigerian government was necessary. So that was exactly what I did. But barely 24 hours after the incident, I was summoned to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office with Sir Godfrey Hall, where Mr. Malcolm, Minister of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. There was also Mr. Squire, Undersecretary, Africa Department, and Mr. Daly, Head of West Africa Department of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Hananiah says, Sir Geoffrey gave a summary of the investigations carried out by the police at Stansted Airport involving a Nigeria Airways aircraft and the alleged intention to abduct Dikko out of Britain. Sir Geoffrey said that it had been established that among the persons arrested were 2 Nigerian High Commission officers. The British government regarded the whole episode with grave concern, he said. He further indicated that investigations had revealed the involvement of Nigeria High Commission officials and requested my full cooperation in the investigations that would follow. He added that it would be essential to waive diplomatic immunity regarding such officials. According to him, the British High Commissioner in Lagos had spoken to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Ibrahim Gambari, on the telephone the previous night and would be seeing him again at 11:30 a.m. that day. He pointed out that Dr. Gambari had asked that the matter be diffused as much as possible. Sir Geoffrey Howe was particularly concerned that a British passenger plane with 220 passengers had been detained in Lagos. The British government saw no justification for such an action and asked for the immediate release of the aircraft and passengers. I responded by emphasizing that neither the Nigerian government nor the High Commission was involved in the abduction incident. I told him I was first informed about the incident by Mr. Squire of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office around 4 o'clock on the 5th of July, 1984. If you turn to page 133 of the book, Ananias says, I learned more and more about what happened. I realized that the intelligence officer at the High Commission had been aware of the matter before the fact. His name was Peter. But in all my interactions with the British authorities, I stood my ground that the federal government of Nigeria had nothing to do with the abduction of Umaru Dikko. Was he lying? Was Ananias lying in that meeting? Okay. Meanwhile, I was in touch with Lagos and could easily access Buhari and Idiagbon. When I expressed anger about not being taken into confidence on the issue, they claimed they did not want me to get involved because of the office I occupied. In one of my conversations with them, I asked, if you do not trust me, then why did you post me to London? Interesting book. Very good storytelling. You want to read more about the Umaru Dikko story? This is an authoritative source. All eyes on me. The book is about Nigerian civil war. Have you heard about the cement armada? Have you studied Decree 4? Buhari's Decree 4, when Buhari arrested journalists. The Umaru Dikko story is also in the book. It's a story of the military. All Eyes on Me by Major General Haidu Hananiah, retired. Look at the book. Highly recommended. Highly recommended. Highly recommended. If you also check this book, this one, entitled Soldiers of Fortune, Nigerian Politics from Muhammadu Buhari to Babangida 1983 to 1993. Chapter 2 is entitled The Kidnap of Umaru Dikko. Chapter 2, well detailed. Detailed. You can also read the story here. The story of Umaru Dikko, another authoritative source on the Umaru Dikko story. soldiers of fortune. Now let's look at the agents involved. Let's look at Mossad and let's see what that operation meant at the time. Remember, North African countries led the move to break diplomatic relations with Israel after her declaration of independence in 1948. It was about the Palestinian issue. It is still the issue as we speak. Arab nations influenced African countries to do the same in solidarity. Israel, having realized it was isolated when it was not invited to the Bandung Conference in 1955, despite being of Asia, decided to wake up and pursue its foreign policy aggressively in Africa. In response to that absence from the Bandung Conference, Israel began building relationships in Africa, starting with East African countries. It gave Ethiopia technical and military support to counter Egypt, which was led by Gamal Abdel Nasser. Abdel Nasser was a strong opponent of Israel. Israel also built ties with Kenya, Tanganyika, Nigeria, and other African countries. But in 1973, the Organization of African Unity called for a boycott of Israel due to its support for apartheid in South Africa. Pressure from Arab countries and the Soviet Union also pushed African nations to cut ties. Still, some countries like Nigeria, continued to work secretly with Israel. The Buhari government was one of such governments. Now, coming back to the method that was used to kidnap Umaru Dikko. If you think back, Mossad used a similar method in 1960 to kidnap Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. Eichmann had escaped to Argentina after World War II. Mossad found him, kidnapped him without Argentina's knowledge, and brought him to trial in Israel. He was sentenced to death. That method was applied to the abduction of Umaru Dikko. It was not just Umaru Dikko or the governors of the Second Republic that were on trial in Buhari's time. As military head of state, Buhari was also ready for internal cleansing of the military. Perhaps that was the reason he ran into trouble and they conspired to overthrow him in 1985. The Buhari government caused division in the military by investigating some officers. In October 1984, Colonel Peter Obasa, Director General of the National Youth Service Corps, was jailed for 22 years for embezzlement. Imagine what Buhari would have done to Umaru Dikko if the government succeeded in kidnapping him and bringing him to Nigeria. Buhari also investigated his Chief of Army Staff, General Ibrahim Babangida, for financial irregularities in the Ministry of Defense. This led to the retirement of Babangida's friend, Colonel Aliyu Muhammad. Babangida did not take kindly to that investigation. The Buhari government also cracked down on bribery and drug rings believed to be backed by senior military officers. Remember the Gloria Okon saga? Someday in this class, we will discuss the Gloria Okon saga. Buhari also reformed the customs service to stop officials from smuggling guns into Nigeria and storing them in their homes. Many corrupt officials were caught off guard and could no longer overcharge. But the case that tainted the government's integrity involved 53 suitcases filled with currency belonging to the Emir of Gwandu. Abubakar Atiku, the same Atiku Abubakar of today, then the area controller of customs at Murtala Mohammed Airport, allowed the 53 suitcases to go through without inspection. When he was asked, he said he acted on orders from Buhari's aide, Major Mustapha Jokolo, who was the son of the emir in question. Having seen enough, the military boys in Buhari's government ganged up. By August 1985, they struck in a bloodless coup and they removed Buhari as the head of state. Ibrahim Babangida, the chief of army staff, became the head of state. It is the fight against corruption. But the military Buhari, was it different from the civilian Buhari? Was there a tough fight against corruption when Buhari re-emerged again in 2015? You can juxtapose the two eras and then help us define the man Buhari. But to help you in your definition of Buhari, to help you in your understanding of the issues we have discussed, to broaden your school of thought, you need to read more books. Books deepen the mind. To read is to feed the mind. So these are the books you should read at the end of this class. So these are the books I'm recommending to you. Get your copies and read them. I have talked about Soldiers of Fortune. Soldiers of Fortune by Max Hewlin. We read from this book on this edition of the program. All Eyes on Me. Beautiful book. Detailed. The language is so simple, lucid. You connect with it. I tell you, once you pick the book, you don't want to drop it. You want to finish reading. And you can finish reading the book in 4 or 5 hours if you are settled. Working with Buhari, Reflections of a Special Advisor, Media and Publicity. This is a book written by Femi Adesina. Working with Buhari. Understanding the military is also understanding Sani Abacha. This book is entitled Sani Abacha, Nigeria's most powerful defense minister and head of state, written by Adebayo Adeolu. Understanding the military is understanding Nigeria's history and politics. Muhammadu Buhari, the Black Pharaoh, a book written by Adebayo Adeolu. Yes, read this. You will love it. Hey, Military Leadership in Nigeria, 1966 to 1979, by Major General James Oluleye. Happy reading. Happy reading. Fellow Countrymen, The Story of Coup d'etats in Nigeria by Richard Akinola. It deepens your mind. Reading is feeding the mind. Feed your mind. The Babangida Story, A Journey in Service, an autobiography by Ibrahim Babangida. A Journey in Service. Good book. Controversial book. A Journey in Service. Politics and Government in Nigeria. Politics and Government in Nigeria. It teaches about basic political concepts, the foundation of government. This book teaches about the forms of government. It teaches about basic political ideologies. You want to know more about the presidential system of government? You want to study delegated legislation, decentralization and centralization? It is the book to read. Politics and Government in Nigeria by Felix Alonge. Politics and Government in Nigeria by Felix Alonge. All right. I'll see you in the next class. Thank you for being there.